I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Elitists United, and if everyone's wondering what are we doing during the off-season between the LEC splits, we're doing that thing again where Veteran pretends anyone cares about the EU Masters, even though it's actually still hard to even get people who actually literally are nerds who coach the fucking LEC teams to watch EU Masters. So hopefully people start to listen. Veteran, I mean, to be fair, the last few years, literally, if you just went and took the players that were hyped on this show when we did these episodes, some of them are literally like some of the best players in the LEC now. It's not even a joke.
True. Yeah, I mean, especially with how many rookies ended up in the LEC in the last off season, like Shadow, for example, is a guy that we bigged up massively. Kazi is a guy we bigged up massively. We even actually had to talk about specifically Giants jungle support, and they are both on Misfits now, and they have all performed really well. Razor actually ended up getting Rookie of the Split, which I don't quite agree with, but you know he is there, and we did talk about him a lot on the show. So yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I mean, I think everyone was just so appreciative that actually there was a jungler on Misfits that could do something. I think it's just been so long, you know, that
actually true. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So obviously the guests for this show, let's introduce them. We've got Szygenda here, who is the top laner of AGO's team. They finished top 4 in the EU Masters, and then the team that beat them, also I'd played them in the group actually, and then won the tournament is going to be TynX here, who's the jungler of LDLC. Right. Let's just start off there, right? Szygenda, do you actually think LDLC was the best team in the tournament?
No.
Should they have won?
I was not expecting them to win at all, actually.
Yeah.
I was really happy when I got them in the group in the start.
Okay. Who were you seeing as the best coming into the tournament?
Like, GamersOrigin was really good. Schalke and Mouse from Scrims were like the best we played. And ourselves, I thought we were like, for sure, contenders.
Okay. What about you, TynX? Who did you have coming in? Like, did you actually think that you yourselves were going to be some of the favourites?
I think us winning was kind of an upset, but yeah, it's kind of the same names like Schalke, Mouse, even Rogue himself, and Kick, I think was really good from scrims. So those are the teams I was looking at list.
Right, Veteran, who were the actual best teams? Bias removed. Well, your bias added, rather.
I mean, bias removed. I thought Rogue versus Mouse was the finals. And then neither of them ended up winning the whole tournament or even being at the finals. So that was a bit of an insane one. I like TynX, but I didn't like him enough to think that he could get around the lane discrepancies that he had there. That would be an issue, I figured, versus both Rogue and Mouse. Historically, the best junglers haven't actually won the whole tournament because there's only so much you can do if your laners fuck up their matchups and you've pathed in a certain way, right? But, you know, I mean, credit to TynX, like, him and his team were able to pull through. I definitely didn't expect LDLC to win the tournament. Like, normally I have a really good idea if he's going to win the tournament. Last year I just straight predicted both times he was going to win the whole tournament. This year I thought it was a lot more open, but even the teams that I thought could win the tournament, none of them were LDLC. LDLC was in my top 4. Actually, I do somewhat agree with the 4 teams that Szygenda named there. I thought Rogue would make a deep run. That was like the only like prediction that I was making, but I didn't even think until like after group stage that Rogue had a legit shot at winning the whole tournament. And part of that, honestly, was because a lot of the other teams just didn't look that strong, right? And like Schalke actually bombed out in groups, for example. I thought Schalke's individual players were a bit overrated. I thought that they were getting by because they had really strong team fundamentals, which not even really TynX's team has. So they got a lot of wins off of that in German league. But yeah, like when I saw how weak everything was, I thought Rogue basically had the tournament in the bag. Even if I still think that, like, for example, Leader is the best mid in the tournament and stuff like this. Mouse honestly had a really powerhouse roster. And I think when Mouse dropped to Rogue, everybody was telling me that this is just not what anyone expected from scrims. Apparently Mouse was just shitting all over everyone in scrims, and then they didn't make it through quarters. So
okay, right, how about we do this? Let's talk about their 2 teams first, obviously 2 of the most successful teams in the tournament, and then we'll move to some of the other teams. Like, actually, the interesting angle is that some of the big teams didn't make it again. It actually reminds me of the one last year where the LDLC team at the time was super hyped and then bombed it completely somehow. Who knows how they did that, but congrats. So apparently, if you actually have a good LDLC team, they are not allowed to win. It's only the ones that aren't supposed to win. So one of the reasons why I understand why Szygenda says he didn't expect LDLC to win is I obviously don't watch the national leagues, but when I was looking up some stuff for this, I saw that you guys got absolutely murked in that LFL final by a team that didn't even do anything in this tournament.
That was not the best, the best games we had. I mean, honestly, for this game, we had Vito, who was coming in as a rookie. It's his first split playing in LFL, and he was not feeling very confident in the finals. So, like, that's some of the things, right? It's definitely not all of it. I think all of us kind of dropped the ball in that final, but like the fact that he was a rookie kind of played a role for sure. For some reason, in like the entire Masters, he felt so comfortable. Like, it's really crazy that he come in and like kind of choked in the finals and then just ending up smurfing it throughout the Masters. Felt really strange to me.
What was the difference, just for anyone, what was the difference between LDLC and LFL in this tournament?
The difference from, I mean, I think our champion pool and like how comfortable we felt were definitely like the biggest indicator, like the biggest change we made coming into it. And obviously we had Jesus helping us throughout the entire Masters and even a bit before. Like, so there's just a few things that went to our favor.
What do you think, Veteran?
Yeah, I mean, I think one reason why I didn't like LDLC's chances is that a lot of their weaknesses in terms of solo lanes were down to champ pools and at least in Bando's case down to play as well. But I think that the way the meta ended up shifting the closer we got to EU Masters made it so top lane was basically Maokai versus Ornn every single game, unless Szygenda decided to come in and just blind pick a Kali every game. But outside of him, it was basically TynX perma, which is why you saw so much Trundle priority as first pick and actually seeing it work out. So then the fact that they didn't necessarily have like one of the strongest top laners in the tournament didn't really matter. VTO's pool never really got abused by a lot of the mids in the tournament. It's rare to find mids at this level that can play the volume of stuff you'd want to be counterpicking. And at the same time, a lot of supports in the tournament were actually quite comfortable going for counterpick themselves. So mids were early rotating. So VTO was actually really fine because they were already early rotating for him, either for his Zoe or for his LeBlanc or for his Cassio, or for any of these picks that he is comfortable early rotating. So the meta kind of shifted into a position where LDLC were already quite comfortable being on there. And then obviously the big one that everyone already identified is that, well, Graves came back in the meta, and the last time TynX was MVP in EU Masters was also when Graves was in the meta. So it was kind of the perfect meta for their strongest player as well, which is why I invited him on the show.
Yeah, you have to understand, TynX. This is actually like a great honour, mate. Veteran did such an about turn that in one of our other things we were talking about, when we were talking to Amazing, he referenced that teams should just pick up Leader, who obviously at this point in time like must be giving him a fucking agent's fee or something. And then you were the jungler, he said they should just pick up you. So I don't know what you've done to impress him so much. Right? Are you good now?
I mean, obviously, like we talked quite a lot, me and Veteran, like just on the side. So he knows like how I think about the game. And I mean, I think there's a slight bias from his side sometimes, but even then he just understands how I think in a way, like that just others don't.
The way I always say it is that I reach out to players that I already think are good, rather than that like I'll talk to a player and then make up my mind that they are good. Like, yeah, I reached out to you after the last EU Masters, where you were also like rampaging on Graves Nidley, but your team was like permanently picking early winning lanes and shit, which wasn't the same case this time around.
Yeah.
And yeah, the way that TynX thinks about jungle is above most people in EU Masters and even a lot of people in the LEC, to be honest, and the way that things optimizes.
In what regard?
So the way he thinks about jungle matchups is with a level of nuance that, for example, we never actually got into in the amazing discussion that we had on the last episodes of Elitists United. He understood very fine points in losing matchups where he will always have an advantage. And he was thinking about the game in this way like 2 years ago. You have to bear in mind that TynX got into competitive very, very fast. Like he isn't like a season 4, season 3 player who started peaking a few years ago. I think you started playing pro like 3 months after you started playing League of Legends, no?
I mean, I went to play jungle in season 6, and then like changing from mid to jungle. Basically, I went from like plat 1 to rank 10 or like challenger playing jungle, and then a team picked me up within 3 months of playing jungle. So it was kind of quick, like transition into pro play. And I would say I definitely lacked a lot of like the understanding of the game coming into the game. Like just being thrown into pro is not always the best thing. I think people should kind of have time to develop in solo queue. At least get a few years where they try to understand the game a bit better. But yeah, I was kind of just mashed into it and then went from there.
Does
When it
something
comes
about
to-
jungle just make sense to you then? How did you jump that quick up?
I think the meta in Season 6 was a bit different. Like, I played Nidalee and Graves even back then in Season 6,
Right,
and
okay.
the meta was just really fucking good for carry junglers.
Sure.
And even then, you could lack some fundamentals. Like, imagine I couldn't play Sejuani, for example, because I just wouldn't understand how to play around my laners properly. But I could easily pick up Graves and Nidalee because I could just like outplay my opponent mechanically and take the lead from there. It wasn't like I would basically just skip steps that usually people would have to learn just by playing not simple champions, but mechanical champions that could dominate
Sure.
early game. So I was just basically skipping steps and just went into it really quickly.
In terms of optimization, all the time in the LEC, we'll see junglers who don't even know how to like get optimal clear speeds on their champions, like Trick being the famous one on Karthus that everyone was criticizing, for example. Whereas TynX goes out of his way to optimize all of these all the time, even on very, very niche matchups. There really isn't, like, there's basically one jungler that TynX won't play, and it's a bit more of a meme thing anyway. But he always picks up new junglers when he can, and he optimizes every aspect of it before he brings it out, and that's actually astonishingly rare at a professional level. It's really not a good thing that it is so rare, but it is rare, and you can see the ramifications of that in LEC all the time. Even Casual, who I've also worked with, didn't optimize that aspect of the game as much as he probably should have.
Okay. Szygenda, what do you think of LDLC? Like, what was different for you? You said you didn't expect them to be this good coming in. Obviously, they played you guys directly. What were they like in the EU Masters?
I don't know, man. We just played super bad on the day, I think. Like,
Where were you
to-
supposed to have
to-
edges over them?
I think I was better than, like, me and bot lane were better. Then we could always just take, like, Prio, and we should opt into, like, abusing TynX somehow. But he got a good matchup, and then he found a way to, like, abuse us, even though I think we were better players.
Does the fact that obviously the storyline, because you won, ended up being the whole thing like, wow, Yellowstar's back or whatever, like, what is actually Yellowstar like at the moment, Veteran? Is he actually a good player?
The thing Yellowstar's actually quite good at right now, which is really weird to say, is that he clearly has a better understanding of lane matchups than a lot of other supports in the region right now, which is definitely not what his strength was back in the day. But outside of that, I do think a lot of the hype on Yellowstar right now is based around is based around the fact that he is Yellowstar, you know,
Yeah, of
and
course.
he isn't running it down after years not being in the scene and being in Master Tier. Like, for example, when Szygenda says that he thought they had better bot lane as well as better top, like I agree with him there for sure. Mystiques, especially in first game, admittedly, Yuumi isn't really a champion for a while, and he was playing Bard v Yuumi, but he did so much to fix a lot of the errors that were going on around the map in the first game that they did versus LDLC. And I obviously ended up getting like caught out once or twice in mid to late game, but there was a really stark difference between him and Yellowstar even in that series. There just wasn't capitalized on enough by Rogue throughout the rest of the series, right? Even though they were prioritizing counter pick on him.
Okay. TynX, what is it like to play with Yellowstar?
I mean, honestly, in the beginning, it was kind of fun because I talked a bit with him before I even joined LAC, and he's obviously kind of famous, so it's really fun just going to the game and like playing with him. But I think he's definitely a player who excels on stage rather than scrims. I think even though he's a really good teammate, he's just always better on stage. I guess the experience just comes in, right? Like, that's all.
Was he actually, is he one of the main voices in the team? Is he doing that element of the game, or is he just a support?
I think it's mainly me, and then after me, it's probably like him and then AD Carry. We were the main voices.
Because if people don't know, like years and years ago, literally when he was like actually in the original Fnatic, not the one with Huni and Rainover and those guys, when he was with Soaz and Expect and all the legendary players,
Yeah.
he was someone where I actually had some spies in Riot at the time who were admins who could literally just hear the comms, and they basically said that, this is funny because this is before he was on the team where he was considered like the leader and got all the props as a shot caller. They said that on the comms he used to comm everything, and he was comming like shit about where the opponents would be even when we couldn't see them, but that the difference was, so as an Expect half the time would just be like, nah, we're going to do something else actually, and just do like whatever the fuck they wanted to do. So I always thought, like, is that overhyped? You know, are they overselling him? But then obviously that season 5 team came along, and listen, just based on things I know now, I don't believe Huni and Rainover were doing half that shit. So I do give him mad props for that really good Fnatic team. So that's interesting if he's actually come back in that regard, because I mean it's a very different game now than then, Veteran.
Yeah. It is really different, but it's really difficult when you're looking. I mean, I guess bot lane was a area where LDLC had strength, but even then they were kind of outclassed in a lot of ways. I think that it's really difficult when it comes to the team wide aspects that Yellowstars typically be attributed for to attribute something to LDLC outside of the understanding of how to play with jungle. But even then, you would see a lot of instances, like even in their game versus Rogue, where TynX is like pulled off of his optimal pathing because, I don't know, like Hades has decided that he needs to all in right now rather than wait a couple seconds longer, or like Bando decided now is the perfect time to go all in on the Cassio even though they have an opening on midsection and shit like this, and you see a lot of reactionary play still from them. I just think that overall the meta ended up favoring them, and when it came to Yellowstar, one big thing Yellowstar was able to do in that meta was actually opt into the counter pick support as well. Like he brought out Bard, and he actually did do a decent amount when he was on that champion. And he wasn't afraid to pick for comp with stuff like the Yuumi, where obviously they did suffer for a while early, but it's just really disgusting to play that with Trundle. Even if I still think you guys actually lost draft in that first game. But yeah, like I'm not. The thing is, I probably wouldn't recommend like anyone from LDLC but TynX to an LEC team. I think VTO has a lot of potential for sure. There's so many AD carries in Europe right now. Like there are so many good AD carries in Europe, and it's difficult for Hades to like break up into the S tier echelons there. And support.
I mean, one of his biggest
really
problems surely is that there was obviously good AD carries that themselves didn't get the chance in LEC or were pushed down again, right?
Yeah, like Neon would be the really obvious one there. Jeskla as well. Yeah, like those guys probably shouldn't have been removed from the LEC in the first place to end up with a surplus. Sure. If the rumors today are true, then Steelback isn't going to be playing in the LEC next split, but I guess Labrov's going to be playing there if that rumor is true, but then Steelback's still kind of up for grabs, right? So there are just like a lot of people in those roles. For top lane, it's a bit different. Like Szygenda, in my opinion, was literally the only good top laner to go to the entire tournament, which almost became a meme on my stream because of how often I ended up saying that when people asked me if like X top laner is good. It's like, for the love of God, none of these top laners, like there's literally only one good top laner in this entire tournament, and it was just Szygenda. Icebeasto did look good in his semi performances. But then in the finals, he really dropped the ball, especially when he was gifted early advantages. And honestly, like he lost them that game too, to be honest as well. Because I've heard Icebeasto getting praised a lot right now, but he's far from what he used to be. Like Szygenda was the only one that he was the only guy that probably didn't get baited by early rotation Trundle. I actually think the Akali Ezreal rotations into LDLC's first pick Trundle were actually really, really good. But Szygenda's the only top laner that could pull any of that stuff off. Yeah.
Just to wrap up the LDLC topic, what is actually the rationale? Like, why is Yellowstar playing again? I mean, people saw that picture where he clearly doesn't have a proper gaming setup, and he was obviously a coach for these years, or he's working in management or whatever. Why is he back in the lineup now? Is this a temporary thing? Is there a plan to keep playing? What's the story, TynX?
Like, at least what he said to us is that he felt like he maybe stopped too early, and he wanted to go back and compete because he still had the hunger to compete. Even though he was doing well as a coach, he just felt like it wasn't enough for him. So yeah, he just wanted to like try his luck again. That's all.
Is the plan right now, at least, that he will keep playing and he'll just be a permanent member of the team?
As far as I know, yeah. I don't know too much what's going on. We haven't really talked too much since the Masters, but from what I know, I'm pretty sure that he's just going to keep playing. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a bit about AGO then. So Szygenda, if you're the best top laner and they're all trash and your team is supposed to do way better and all the rest of that, now you have to explain why you didn't. And it can't just be like, oh, it was a bad day. It's like, mate, how many fucking bad days do you want? It wasn't all one day, was it? It was a week-long tournament. So come on, give us your reasons.
No, but on the day I played really bad as well. Like I think we just played really bad on the day. We also had like very big draft error, like game 3. We could like very easy win the series. We went in like we gave Graves. We wanted to like take prior lanes. But then we somehow drafted like Israel on, and last pick like Orianna. So it was not really like any prior lanes. We just went in to play and hope for the best. It was really weird, the last draft.
How does that happen though? Like in your team, like are people just freewheeling it in the draft, and some people taking things that don't make sense? Did the coach just misread it? What happened?
I'm not really sure what happened. We went in with like a good plan, but then out of nowhere someone just said pick something and we went with it, and then it like went the wrong way. I cannot remember what it was, but we wanted like on something like damage jungler to like
You went
abuse.
on Ezreal.
Yeah, but we want like on Aphelios to like just full shit on them in like team fights, but then we like push it out because they first pick Varus and we didn't expect. So it was really random what happened after that. And then we went like bad as well with no damage on the team. So we couldn't play for any side lanes, and we just had to wait out and hope they didn't get too much early game. And then we just lost because they got Graves with winning lanes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll disagree on the winning lanes part. I actually think you guys did have priority early, and I think that also bore itself out in the game as well. Even if like the level 2 engage from Mystique's on bot didn't go well, but it's more that the level 1 didn't really go well for them. There's no way that Yasuo and Braum should be that comfortable leading up to that. But you guys did have
it's game 3 by the way. That's right.
Game 3. Yeah, game 3. Game 3.
Game 3 was Mars.
Okay. Okay.
Like the game 2, it was just coin flip, but unlucky, and we went next.
Yeah. Game 3 is on Ezreal. Oh yeah. You guys still do have. Yeah. So yeah, I remember. Yeah, no, you lose this game in draft because they have like massive disengage, and you fully commit to like Java and Oriana on in the face of that. Yeah.
By the way, can I ask a question? Because I only watch obviously the top leagues, etc. But the amount of the top leagues that pick Jarvan and it just loses the fucking game is mental. Like, why is this pick so prioritized? Why is it on people's list even?
Honestly, I don't know.
I don't know. I hate this game.
Yeah, I think it's useless.
I think there's champ pool issues when you look at like EU Masters level that explains some discrepancies like this. And I think that it's Zanzor, right? Like at this point, he's either going to pick a tank or he's going to pick Rek'Sai. So it's like Jarvan is just the default that will end up on here. He doesn't really have any sort of heavy kiting champions, I guess, that he could do here. So I think it's more of like a champ pool issue. I do want to say they do still have 3 winning lanes early. You have Ezreal Bard into Braum Varus, you have on top into Maokai, and you have Oriana into Akali. So you still have it's just like this was the mid. This was Zanzibar almost won that matchup because there's theoretically no way that he shouldn't double scuttle TynX every time there. But then they go into like that midsection contest, and you live on like 1 HP on mid. If you remember,
I knew the Braum heal was coming in. I was chilling.
Yeah, I mean that was if he got that, it was double scuttle for him, full reset off, and then it's just really it's really doomed for TynX. Like I think I misplayed early game.
Yeah, for sure. I misplayed early game. I could have just like path different, and it would have been fine. It was just my bad. But then I just ended up like going for mechanical upland, worked out anyway.
At least you're honest.
Yeah, I mean that's just how it works. Like I fucked up, and then just we outplayed them.
The thing is that if that composition from Rogue doesn't get ahead early, then they do just straight lose. They do just straight lose if they aren't able to split LDLC for the rest of the game, because there's no way for them to win a 5v5 contest against that, which is a stark difference from the first game, where I think they actually heavy won draft, and I was amazed it ever looked anywhere near as close as it did. There should be no way that you guys can contest 5v5 into fucking Cassio, Ezreal, Bard, basically ever. And you guys saw that once neutral objective contest came in. Like first one you lost because you peeled off Baron and then just ran into them. You can't do that at this point. Shaco Lad is just way too strong. And then second, they're first on because of the first fight, and then it's just doomed from that point.
Honestly, after game 1, we said, okay, we fucked up draft, but if we just like ban properly next time, we can easily beat them because they're trolling so hard. Like, there's no way we should have been able to play game 1. That was our mindset going into game 2, and after that, it just felt really comfortable.
What are your thoughts then? TynX, give me your thoughts on AGO then. Did they do something wrong?
I mean, I think definitely they're playing the map completely like terrible, and they had huge jungle champion pool issues. Like, I knew going into the game that he was either going to pick a tank or like Rek'Sai. And then, okay, I picked Trundle. What is he going to pick? Well, he has to pick Rek'Sai or tank. And then he ends up picking like Sejuani into Trundle in some games where I blind pick Trundle. And like it should theoretically be impossible for them to play. And then even when I pick like some other things blind, like the Graves, he ended up picking the Jarvan. That's still a good matchup for me. So at least for me going into this game, I just felt so fucking comfortable because I knew that there's no way in hell that this guy could like pick champions that would be useful ever. So
That's always being an issue with Zanzor, though.
I mean, this is his issue, but imagine it was a different meta where TynX would be meta. I think this guy would have been like really fucking good, right? So it's just like unlucky for him that the meta turned out to be like more carry style, I guess. But still, I think you should be able to like kind of adapt and at least have something ready. Like if it's me and I know that I can't play something and I might want to like have to play against it, I will find a counter. Like if I can't play the champion, I'll find a counter for it or ban it. That's just my way of thinking anyway. But usually I can end up playing the champion. Like both matchups fine. So
to clarify, I do think Zanzor is actually a very intelligent jungler. The way that he even played out that last game was actually pretty good for him until he got like RNG'd by the Born. But
I mean, if people forget, when we did last year's show, he was obviously the one who filled in as the jungler for Origin in the regionals, right? Yeah. And so I think at the time you even said he was like a player not to dismiss just because they lost or whatever. So it's just the bad meta for him.
I mean, the fact that he's picked up Rek'Sai shows that he's at least aware of his champ pool issue, and he is trying to expand into. That's not necessarily a carry-oriented champion, but more of like a damage dealer, ganking-based champion, right? Like he's trying to move away from his tank-only thing. Like just even though like Nemesis fans won't really get this, like just because I say someone has champ pool issues doesn't mean I fucking hate them. But he does have champ pool issues, and I still think he's actually a very intelligent player. But this definitely, like, he was definitely a crutch in draft throughout, especially when Trundle first pick became priority. They almost had to ban that at a point. But then,
no, I mean, I'll just say this: it's not that way around. People have got the cart before the horse. It's people who have champ pool issues who hate themselves. Like that's why they get so insecure. Like if you actually thought that your 3 champions that you play was sick, like Leader does, you'd just go, "I don't give a fuck. I'll pick him into anything and beat you anyway." That's what you'd actually do if you were confident. The difference is people like the aforementioned player just somehow want it both ways. It's like they want to do nothing, lose, and then say that they're super sick at the game. It's like, well, I mean, if you ask me, you're sort of talking shit on your teammates there, but it's just me. You know. Sure. What about this then? Let's talk about the team that you played in the final, TynX.
Sure.
Right. So listen, just so we can get out of the way, that was just a meme, that whole thing about Puki style. That was just people having fun. That was the fact that he'd played for so long and that he was coming back and this was his chance to win and you guys were the underdogs. So everyone thought he's going to win, big tournament after all these years. I get the whole angle that it's a fun angle. People who maybe don't know the players in the EU Masters are just memeing and getting in on it, etc. But the reason I bring that out at the beginning is I don't want people to think we're now going to have an half an hour discussion about Puki style and that he's going to be in the fucking LEC. Like he is, like calm down. Calm down. Like him winning this shit was going to be like, there we go, Puki. Now you can fuck back off, mate. We're going to watch all the good players now. See, mate, like you're all right. Like it's actually, in fact, if anything, he had his own Yellowstar hype. It's like, wow, he's still playing. That itself's cool. That's the meme. So, what did you think of this team in the final? Like, were you actually going in also thinking this team's supposed to be favoured against us?
I think, like, this was probably one of the more even games I would expect. Like, I think there were favors, but like less favors than some of the other teams would have been if they were in the finals, if that makes sense. Okay. It's probably like a 60-40 to their favor. I think we just like
it's mainly because they were playing you. Basically, in theory, yeah,
I guess. But it's like the whole poker style thing. I think he's even he's still a good player, but just really hyped up. By the way, like
sure.
It was a bit too far. But I mean, it was good fun. Yeah, I don't know. It was a bit ridiculous. But yeah, we felt kind of confident going into the game because I mean we obviously just won like the day before, the day before. So yeah, we felt confident.
Veteran, come on then, give me the real. How good actually is Puki style, and can we just get that part out of the way and talk about the actual games?
He has such a massive, like obviously it's obvious now that he has such a massive following. But even when I was doing like my pre-split tier lists and shit, because I didn't have Puki style on like anywhere near A or S tier, people were like his Polish fans were just all over my DMs and shit. Like it's actually insane. He has a lot of them. I think he's solid. I think he did his job. But he was the player that had to carry in the last game, for example, and he wasn't able to. Right? I think he was far from the problem with that team. I think he was actually one of their stronger players. Matislaw obviously didn't really have that good a series in the last series, and I think Schlatten on that team has also been really overrated. Schlatten's kind of like Gilius in a sense where Gilius tries to like force certain things and they won't always work, but when they do work, people decide that it is God Gilius reborn. But otherwise, it's just like normal Gilius, right? Slatten's kind of like that, in that he forces a ton of ganks that shouldn't work, but they do end up working at the lower level. And then the further in the tournament that we got, the less superstar Schlatten that we saw. Puki never really did anything super memorable, to be honest, throughout the tournament. I think he's a good AD carry. I don't think he's one of the people who will ever be starting in the LEC anytime soon. I think it's really impressive how long he stayed in the scene, and I think he'll continue to get jobs around the Polish scene. But yeah, obviously, he's kind of had his 15 seconds of fame right now. You know.
By the way, can we also just get this out of the way, just so anyone out there who's still stupid enough, he doesn't ever have to mention this again. He doesn't have an enormous arm. That's called perspective, you fucking idiots. It depends on the angle of the camera. Like, you must also believe that all those girls who are incredibly thin have massive arses. You ever noticed that their legs bent on the Instagram picture, you idiot? Like, think it through. Right. Like, you can take your phone right now and it'll look like your face is like 15 feet tall if you do the right angle. Like, how are these people getting tricked by literal smoke and mirrors here? What is this? Do you not know what optics are? I mean, I guess in League of Legends no one does. That's why fucking TSMs do what they do. So, right. Anyway, pivoting straight in. What do you think of this team, Szygenda? What did you think? Like, were you expecting once LDLC beat you? Like, were you low key salty? Like, fuck, we should have won that, so they're going to lose in the final. Come on, be honest.
I would say there was a decent chance Kick could win. Like, they were like super aggressive, and it's like the best way to beat LDLC, because it was like just two aggressive teams coming at each other and kind of flipping. Like, if Slatter got good matchup and went to the jungle and fucked TynX, I think it was like very hard for LDLC. But
plus, you have to realise, I'll give you a little tip here as how marketing works, mate. Since you did beat them in the Ultra League, you're supposed to say that they're really good, because that means you beating them makes you really good. So it's all about their relative skill.
King are so good, man. They were probably the best. It was just an unlucky day.
There you go. What about is a factor in this? Because one area I always find when I've watched all these EU Masters playoffs is there are always mad upsets. And I have to say, one of the factors there, like I often describe in most esports games, like I'd say I describe the analogy as a competitive ladder. And I mean as in, like, you're semi-pro, then you just get on a team, then you run in the competition and you make the playoffs for the first time. You learn what that's about. You play an online tournament, you go to LAN. You go to the LAN, you make the playoffs there. You know, like some players have to go step by step by step because it's a different environment every time. The pressure's different every time. And until you've been in that scenario, there's no scrim in the world prepares you for an actual real final. Like, it doesn't matter what the coach does in that scenario. So do you think actually thinks that some of these teams did have like a choke factor in the playoffs? Like in this final, were they underperforming for this reason?
I mean, maybe not so much the finals, but definitely the other games leading up to the finals. Like, I could feel that people were just playing worse. Like, I think I'm one of those players who are really good at, like, smelling out the fear and just, like, going in and playing ham anyway. There's so many times where I was just walking into the jungle, like, even being ready to take 1v2s or whatever. So, for sure, there are some people who are just scared to play the game. In the final, I think, because it's 3 games and you know you always have a chance, like, I think people were a bit more comfortable, especially because it's not even a stage game, right? Like, you're playing for the comfort of your own home. So you can kind of just like sit back and relax because you know, like, especially when we are ahead 1-0, like for us, it was really comfortable to continue playing because we know that we had at least 3 more games coming up, right? So like you had more chances and enemy team knew that as well, like going in from the first game. So even though there's definitely still like some people who struggle more than others, like it was not that big in the finals, I felt, mainly in the games coming up, yeah. Like when there's a knockout game, for example, we played the tiebreaker against Giants. I could feel like their like enemy felt really scared to play.
What would your valuation be, Veteran? You think the playoffs did change it in that regard?
I mean, I think all of the teams that I actually kind of blame Rogue a bit here because I think all the teams that should have been really strong against LDLC kind of got knocked out early on. I think the biggest like kind of player change throughout playoffs was Ice Beasto, both up and down. I think Schlatten just ended up against like better players throughout. That makes sense because I mean, yeah, again, the thing about TynX is that TynX kind of understands how to play out his matchup, and Schlatten never really showed that he was able to do that, right? And I think Schlatten gets thrown really off kilter when his first forces don't work, and that's when TynX can, I've never heard you say that before, but like smell out the fear and then understand when he's going to be able to do something in those scenarios. Because normally, like Schlatten actually came in with a lot of hype. You probably don't know that, Thorin, but he actually did come in with like a ton of hype. And he ultimately like didn't show up on that day, but I kind of feel like I saw the same Schlatten from the start towards the end in terms of his tendencies. I'm not sure if that's like to do with the way playoffs win or just because teams just get stronger, obviously, as you go through the playoffs ladder, you know?
I think he had an easier like time leading up to finals than I did, for example. I think our group was definitely harder, and he had like more games where he could actually show himself, if that makes sense. Like just an easier time. I don't know if that's part of what you mean, Veteran, but at least that's how I felt.
I mean, I think he had an easier time in group stage than anything. I think even when he was against, because the thing that he runs into issues with isn't even necessarily like jungle matchup. I think it's more to do with like lane matchups, and I do think that even if MRS. I don't think like I think Alura actually looks pretty decent, but there are a lot of people there who fundamentally do understand what they are doing in lane-based scenarios. Their bot lane actually started to look really, really fucking good the more we went through the tournament. And Binsu at least like understands fundamentally what he should be doing, even if he isn't like very impressive at all. And Schlatten's openings were like a lot less. There's a specific pool where Shiko seems comfortable in mid lane. He was at least able to get that pool. So then Schlatten didn't find openings in any of those lanes. So I think that whereas you can argue that he had like that you had harder teams because you were against like Rogue, right? You were on the harder side of the bracket for sure. I think that his side of the bracket was actually still going to be very good against him, almost no matter who he was facing anyway. I think this guy just right now isn't really cut out for super high level play, but I think he's really good at abusing noobs right now.
For the record, I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I think he's been really fucking good, like even in scrims, and he's really young, so I'm sure that he's gonna like show up in the future for sure. But that's just like some of the things that I was feeling.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the teams that were the big names, and obviously the majority of them underperformed. So, like the first one we have to talk about, Veteran, is obviously Mousesports, because on paper this was supposed to look like a real nice roster. I mean, some of these players people would want to be in the LEC. Yeah,
I mean, they have more ex players than any of the other rosters that made it into the top 8, I'm pretty sure as well, because the whole bot side of their map with Leader and Jeskla and Promisq are all ex-LEC. So, like a lot of people expected them to make deep runs in the tournament. I thought that, again, them versus Rogue was like the real finals. Leader was now playing more than just melee champions every game, i.e. he's actually bringing his Azir from solo queue into competitive. Top side of the map, kind of a different story. So it's no secret that I always thought Obsessed was a bit overrated, to say the least. And then when it comes to Tolkien, I thought Tolkien had a very specific function in the old Mousesports roster, which is that they basically gave him champions like Renekton, etc. And they were just like, all right, you are going to ensure we have top priority for our lane swap scenario at 10 minutes. And then they always did that swap scenario, and they always won the skirmish because they picked like fucking Swain Tarek or some dumb shit. And every time they got contested around Herald, they always won. But that was basically Tolkien's function on those teams. And beyond that, he wasn't really like an incredibly strong side lane or anything like this. They were just very good at snowballing objectives from that initial Herald, partly because they had Shadow and Kaiser on that team, who are now at Mad Lions. And Shadow, I think, should have been further in contention than Razork for the Rookie of the Split award. So I don't think Tolkien matches up with someone like Szygenda, for example. I thought that would be a really big issue for them. So Leader's Azir did look really good a few times, and then there were times where it was quite obvious he wasn't that comfortable on that champion. I'm not gonna lie. Like I love Leader, but I'm not gonna pretend that his Azir is anywhere near the level of his like Irelia or Yasuo or Akali or any of this stuff that is like a permaban versus him at basically any stage, even when he was in LEC.
Why bother playing it then?
Well, he knows that he has to showcase that he doesn't necessarily have this issue, but a big thing is that I think Azir is a massive deal in the meta right now. I think if you can blind
but if he's
early,
as good as he's supposed to be and above the others, then just play whatever you want, right?
I don't necessarily disagree with you. When he played Akali into Magic Felix's Azir, for example, I've never seen like Magic Felix play so passive in my life. And Magic Felix is kind of known not to be like a heavy lane winning guy anyway. But people are legitimately scared of him on all of those other champions. It's just a lot better for team if you are able to rotate Azir early on. And I kind of do agree with you that maybe he should have like stuck to his other melees and stuff. But at the same time, I don't want him to think, oh, fuck that, this experiment didn't work. He has other mages that I know he can play as well. I think his Azir is still very, very good. But like the best Azir in the whole tournament is actually on Szygenda's team. Checolad, for example. It's not on the level of any player like that right now. And I am glad that he brought it out. It was far from the reason why they lost. They were so off on timings around objectives, and that's mostly down to jungle. And they are still pretty bad at map setups in mid to late game, and that's kind of on all of them. And that was a running issue in German league as well, which is why Schalke are always really good into them. Because if you did a bad lane setup into Schalke, they would find the window to TP 4 people onto someone when you can't respond, and they would always win. They were really, really good at finding those map-based windows, and they never fixed those problems. So even though they were 5 really good players, you could maybe argue, well, I would argue 3 really good players and then 1 player who had a function and then 1 not so good player. They were never really a strong team. Definitely not on the level of like what Rogue were, not on the level of what Schalke were as a team, on the level of any of these guys. It's kind of like the Misfits issue, right? When Misfits last year had like 4 really good players in Maxlaw, but it didn't turn into like a really good team, you know? Like it does require more than that, and that just wasn't there. And then if leader is on the Azir, he's not going to hard 1v9 carry every game. He did 1v9 carry a couple of games on the Azir, but he's not going to do what he can do on a Kaliasa. Sure. And at that point, you kind of need him to be able to be that player. But they had to improve as a team. Unfortunately, they're going to be judged as individuals based off that, and I think that's unfair. I think leader is still the best mid laner outside of the LEC, but even in this tournament, you saw a lot of players who will be looking to take that crown from him in the next 1 or 2 years. Checolad being one of those guys for sure. Checolad was the only guy, or until the finals, was the only guy that I gave player of the day to, even though he lost on that day. So yeah, like I'm actually really excited for that guy. I think VTO is on TynX's team. He's giga young right now. He's 17, but he has a lot of time to get around his current champ pool issues. Can't expect 17-year-olds to play every fucking champion in the game, so I hope he doesn't take that insultingly. But yeah, like there are a lot of mid laners who will end up catching up to him, and it's really, really sad if they do before leader got like an LEC shot to show that he is one of the highest ceiling talents in the region.
I mean, that's really the issue there, isn't it? He's like, in that scenario, he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't. Because if he plays Azir, that's the problem. Yes, it's a fucking sick. You can obviously just blind pick it now, but you're not going to fucking 1v9 all the games. But if you only 1v9 the games and the champions everyone knows you're good on, well, anyone who knows you're good on them knows you're good on them anyway. And then, as you say, people are just going to think, well, if it ends up being Azir Corky, why do we want the guy? So you can't really win in that scenario.
Yeah, like I mean, this is my plug for this is why I loved promotion relegation, because then he could just like lock a Kali in every fucking game and then just shit on all the kids and then promote and then bring out Azir and blah, blah, blah when he's an LEC, you know? But that option isn't here. So do you get optics? Do you get the right optics, or do you just not get optics at all? You know, like you have to think about so much Reddit perception when you're in EU Masters right now, in like the underbelly of the amateur scene, that you didn't have to think about the last times I was there. And I do think that's a bit bullshit, because I do worry that players who didn't even make this tournament, who are better than some of the players in that role, will get shout-outs just because they weren't here and they weren't on the winning team, you know?
Sure. Right, let's talk Szygenda. Give us some thoughts then, because obviously your team was the team that beat them. So what happened in this matchup? Like, were you expecting them to be a strong team against you?
It was like one of the better teams we could draw when we like got the second seed. We were really happy with this. We could like we saw we could just like ban really Akali, and leader would be like not as effective. So and we got like kind of our best champs on every role. Like I just had to get like a bruiser to like skirmish. We got Sejuani 2 times, Syndra, Checolad's best champ by far, and I think there was Time Kench 2 games in a row, which was like most played bot lane. So when we got like this draft, it was just like really, really free. And then they like, I think they like got ace 2 times bot lane. Like they just full over committed, and we just TP on them, and after that it was just over.
I think you didn't have the same like fundamental issue in jungle here because he couldn't really play like the things that would really shut down Sansara anyway. So
yeah, Upsus
like,
didn't play Graves as well, so we let like Graves through, and I think Trundle they banned, so it was like we could just pick Szygenda, and everything was like really good for us.
It seemed a lot easier from you guys just going into draft in those games.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember when the bot skirmish happened and fucking Syndra suddenly has 4 kills out of nowhere, and now mid lane is completely unplayable. Actually, yeah, I'd actually forgotten about that until you just brought it up. Then, fuck me, actually.
It was not really good games. It was just really flip minute 10, 2 games, and then it was over. So kind of unlucky to like showcase
a quick 2-0.
But we were obviously happy that we won.
Actually, one thing I want to ask is, again, since you say Veteran, and this is obviously true just in the way fans think, it's people who didn't watch the games aren't just going to look at the names, see the overall team result and go, right, everyone who's on the team gets that L and they're not as good as the teams that beat them. Well, another player that will absolutely cripple, like this is the end for Promisq, I'm telling you right now, Veteran. You can't have your entire career be, he's so good though, just give him a shot, and then every time it's like you're supposed to do it, you don't do it. And being a memester for G2 does, like, he's only got the memes. So, like, was that unfair for him in this tournament? Was this supposed to be his chance to show himself?
Yeah, but like he has like weird ideas on some matchups as well. And then this series, he definitely wasn't like the primary issue, but most of the shit that happened did end up happening in his lane, and I have no idea what the shot calling kind of thing is that drags everyone down at that particular point. Like I remember even after that happened, Leader looks to set up a kill with Tolkien on midsection, and then when he goes in, Tolkien's just suddenly TPing to bot. Like, I have no idea what's going on in the comms there, but he basically fucking kills Leader by, like, he's TPing in front of him. Like, what the fuck's going on here? I have no idea what's going on in comms there, but if you have to think between, like, Jessica and Promisq, which one's going to be the more vocal in that regard? I think Promisq got mischaracterized a lot as being like one of the worst supports in Europe. And to my dying day, my biggest criticism has been that he's like the epitome of average when he was in the EULCS, right? Like he was a solid 5th place support player when he was in the EULCS. I don't think that his record kind of shows how good he was. He obviously was like never one of the greats.
Sure.
But I don't think he deserves the reputation he had in the past. That being said, I'm way less likely to like weep for someone who kind of had their shot, right? And he's had so many shots, you know, rather than for some of the talent that didn't necessarily make it into UM and won't get any optics on them, or someone like Leader who only got thrown into like a horrible situation in the LEC, still did well in it anyway, and then got dropped by like complete bastard of an organization, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, like it probably is it for Promisq. It probably already was it for Promisq. Being a sub for G2 for a year is not like a ringing endorsement of your abilities, you know? It's a really nice paycheck and it's a really nice set of tweets when you get the MSI medal and shit. But it's not a career booster unless maybe you're like a streamer or something like that, you know?
Sure.
So I think it was kind of already done for him. And also, if career is over now, I get to say that I'm the only coach that got that guy to playoffs. So, you know, it's also kind of fine to let it die now. Yeah, it's perfect. Another one on my CV.
And even then, he gave you the sport and chance, you know, the head start not to make it. you must have been the Promisq whisperer, mate. You turned it around.
I was actually so happy for him more than anyone when we did make playoffs there. Like I actually remember I just went straight up and like hugged him out of all of them because I thought he got way too I thought he just got given way too hard a time in the years beforehand, and I thought he was always at least a playoffs level support. But like he ended up in that god awful Elements roster and shit like this beforehand, you know. So and they'll just see that you're on a bottom tier team, so they'll put you on another bottom tier team. But yeah, he's had a career. He's had a good time. I'm not necessarily going to weep for him, but it probably is.
Let's pivot then. So another team, we'll go along the same lines. If people are just looking for name value here and they're going, right, that's an interesting mix, this should do something. The idea that the Schalke team didn't even make the playoffs, like there's another team with a whole bunch of people who were literal starters last year. Like these were people who, some of them this year. So What's going on here? Like, who wants to volunteer this one? Who wants to flame Schalke first, basically? TynX is too nice. I can already tell he's going to fans have fucked up Anglers to why it wasn't their fault.
I think I'll give this one to Veteran. He's the one who has the most out there opinions.
Okay.
I don't have the most out. I was right. Like these guys were the LDLC of this tournament. I remember every time I said that to TynX, he got really he had no idea what I meant because he's on LDLC now. But LDLC every tournament beforehand were overrated because they had 5 players people really overrated and perceived to be really good. And now that they have 5 players that no one perceived to be really good, they suddenly win the whole thing. So you can tell public perception is just fucking off when it comes to players. But they were definitely that. They understood some really good fundamentals, which is what Stillback added to LDLC last year, for example. And people just attributed that to them as individuals. People were bringing up Certus as S+, people were bringing up Sleeping as S+. All of I don't even think if you ask those players themselves that they would say that they are anywhere near that level. But they just were a team that I wouldn't say they were really well coached, but the conversations that they were having about how to play out map states had to be pretty good because they were very good at reacting to poor map states from their opponents. By which I mean that they always knew when they could make up a numbers advantage in a fight. If they didn't have a numbers advantage, they just wouldn't take the contest. They were not the kind of guys who are rolling around trying to smell the fear of everybody and then flipping on whether it's right or wrong or not. They weren't those kinds of players. They were very set in stone in the playstyle that. Not really a playstyle, but in a set of fundamentals, they're slightly out of date. It's very bare bones. It's not really filled with nuance, but because they kept playing on that set of fundamentals, it was very difficult for an opponent to find openings against them, and eventually they would find an opening against you. And that was always what was really good about them. It wasn't that Sleeping was like a god. It wasn't that Certus was the second coming of Christ.
Is Neon in your hell then?
When Neon arrived in there, you could argue that they had one of the best bot lanes in the ERLs for sure. So Nukeslot actually plays champions now instead of just playing Janna, which is really shocking every time I think about that. But I think the Nukeslot memes were before TynX's time. But their bot lane was a pretty good source of strength, but it was a good source of strength in lane, and they didn't prioritize hard winning matchups on it. When they beat when they destroyed Mouse, to be honest, they were running MF into Kalista 3 games in a row. They were running themselves into Kalista Taric 3 games in a row with MF fresh. But they never really played around that strength. They just understood a few simple basics, and they made sure they never fucked up on those simple basics. And as a result, the whole team looked really good. And then they came up against teams that had rosters that had significantly better players than some of them in some areas, and then suddenly they lost that kind of thing, right? And then honestly, them not making it out of groups is a little bit more about the fact that it's best of ones. The game that they didn't make it out on is such I don't want to call it a fluke game, but that's kind of a bullshit way to end up winning. That. How long did that game end up lasting? 50 minutes? Something really stupid like that. And I don't think that result gets repeated versus them very often. I think that was kind of the Misfits v Rogue of this EU Masters. If you remember, Misfits v Rogue last year was that game where leaders Misfits beat Rogue when they literally had 5 kills to 22, some ridiculous number like that, because Hiva was trying to break a record or something. But I think if you put them in a best of 2 or a best of 3 to qualify, then they end up winning every time. But yeah, it's a best of 1. I do think they were overrated. I don't think they would have made it out of quarterfinals no matter who they drew. I favored most teams versus them. Even Mouse coming into that tournament, I think I would have ended up favoring in a best of 3 scenario at that specific tournament, the way the meta had started shifting. But that's my spiel on Schalke, I guess.
Okay. Right, for you two, I don't blame you. I don't know how many games you watched of this team and this tournament. Obviously, they weren't in your group. So
0 of them.
Yeah, do you have some general thoughts on them as a team? If you've scrimmed them, if maybe you watched the German final or something?
We've scrimmed them quite a bit, and I think they're a strong team, but definitely not invincible. I think there's a lot of the teams in the EU Masters this time around that just had maybe 1 or 2 spots where that was just not looking as strong as a LEC team or whatever you would say. I think for Schalke it was probably Sleeping, who was not the strongest player they had. So like they definitely had issues, right? Like they were not unbeatable.
Like for me, every time we script them, they were like one of the other teams. We usually like 2-3 or like sometimes we lost like hard, and sometimes
What were
we
they
beat
good
them.
at?
They just played like as a team. Most teams they like play for themselves, but these guys usually followed like the game plan. Just played overall like pretty solid. So I was quite surprised they didn't make it like further.
TynX, what did you think of Gilius?
I mean, Gilius have quite the past, I guess. Like I don't know, like.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Is everyone, even though we all know he's just talking shit, people can't get past that. You've got to like remove that from your brain. Just look at him as a player. Who is he a player beyond all the memes and shit?
Every time I played against him in scrims, he wasn't like ever surprising me like other, like not, I won't say like other players would, but he was never really surprising me. So I felt like fairly comfortable playing against him every time. It was nothing crazy. Like he was not bad either. Like he was pretty good, I would say, but he just wasn't like insane either. I was never scared to play against him. I never felt like huge amount of pressure.
Sure.
Like that's just it. Like he was just another jungler. Nothing special.
Sadly, that has always been the most depressing thing about Gilius is that the show element's brilliant. I always thought like if you took his the way he acts like that and then you put it with anyone who was a really aggressive jungler, you'd have a monster star on your hands, even if they weren't even a winning team. His problem is it's like he's like hyping himself up as like the ladies' man. Then he's like, "Pow! How you like that missionary sex? 3 minutes in out. Would you like a cup of tea?" It's like, "Fuck what? You talk such a good game. Like what's that shit? Like." It's not even that you're bad. You're just all right. Like fuck. You just tea with one sugar and a little bit of milk. It's like it's not shit. It's just all right, isn't it? It's no one's favorite drink, though, is it?
I think Lowox is better than Gilius. Just want to throw it out there. I think they should.
So does Schalke.
The whole time. But yeah. Actually true.
Yeah,
Actually
exactly.
true.
The only question is, does even Gilius think that?
You know the answer to that.
I do. Well, that's the problem. I've always told you. I think if I ever got him in like some 1984 type scenario where I was interrogating, I'd break him. I think I'm. Like you saw the time he came and listened local, mate. It was garbage. He didn't even say anything because he just knew he'd get murked.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a kind of a weird spot to be in, no? Because pretty much everything he says can be me like after.
Sure.
But
that's just because of the things he says, though. He just stopped saying.
He has put himself in that position. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know for that one. Anyway, that was just an aside on that one. Right, what about this then? So another team that's obviously worth talking about is Fnatic Rising.
Yeah,
this is a squad where Felix is another one of Veteran's predilections, I'll just say. He's like someone where everyone else thinks he's all right, or maybe he could be good one day, and Veteran thinks he basically should be in the LEC now. I mean, that's maybe a little bit of a stretch this season because there's some very good mid laners, but typically that's kind of where we're at, right, Veteran? So Fnatic Rising... Problem here, mate, is they've got most of the players that were in the previous ones where they were really good. So what's going on here?
So, okay. So I try my best not to to defend these guys against this specific allegation, but like the game 3, it legit looked like Magic Felix and Natty were choking. Like, holy shit, how many times can you die in midsection? Like, over and over, and like finding new creative ways to get caught. Like, it's really insane. And I really don't like. I for Magic Felix especially, like, I hate that they had that kind of stigma attached to them. But honestly, in that game, they just didn't look comfortable whatsoever. There were just decisions they were making in midsection that were throwing so much of the game where it didn't have to be thrown. Dan was still playing really phenomenally. I felt like I got robbed of not being able to see Dan versus TynX. I think that Dan was the next best jungler the entire tournament. I think that him and TynX were like on a different level compared to everyone else.
If people forget that they literally, when they had that first split that was kind of ropey, they originally said that they were going to literally potentially have like position contests between Broxah and Dan. That was a real thing. People forget it now. That really happened.
That turned into, like, from my information, that ended up being more of like a political thing behind the scenes as to why that didn't end up happening. Like, Broxah does deliver things that Dan perhaps doesn't. Not in game, but like in comms, he was pretty good, like motivationally and stuff like that there. But there were also like other reasons why Dan didn't end up like straight up starting them that weren't necessarily in Dan's control, but more to do with what like the team was comfortable doing at the time. I felt like he should have gotten a lot more chance for sure. He's a jungler who should still be starting. Xmati for me was one of the best AD carries in all of the regions. I held him and Neon in a particularly high regard. But that last game, like I ended up giving him the Usain Bolt award for that day, which for anyone who can't guess is the award for whoever sprinted it down the hardest that day, of which TynX's top laner won it the most times in the entire tournament. But the game 3 performance there just was not on for them. It was absolutely a winnable game. They just sprinted it like in midsection. It's really horrible that I can distill a particular game into that. They should have made it further in the tournament. They 100% should have made it further in the tournament. I wish it was a best of 5 because I'm very sure that they would come back in that series. If it was a best of 5, that third game, I mean, probably wouldn't have held such dramatic weight for them. I think when it comes to support top, their top lane has a lot of issues. Their support player, at the very least, can play 2 champions pretty well right now, which is Set and Taric, but I do think that he's going to be the guy that ends up having pool issues out of all of them. He's bravado. I've talked about him before over the years, but he hasn't been developing at like the pace that he really should to kind of stay in the upper echelons of supports that I'd recommend kind of deal. But nonetheless, like the third game was 100% winnable. They should have been in the semis, and then I think Schlattern's tendencies would be pretty exposed versus someone like Dan, and then they could have very easily made it through to the finals if they didn't have such a horrible third game in quarters. Yeah.
Right, come on, Szygenda. Tell me about your position in Fnatic Rising Pride, because you'd think, right, that he'd be 1+ for the team, right? That's a double joke there, mate. He's from Switzerland, which has a plus cross on the flag, and also 1+ sponsors Fnatic. That's actually straight fire, by the way. So anytime you guys can get on that level, just let me know. But anyway, was this guy bad? Was he having problems?
I never played him. I was not thinking.
You've never ever played him?
Yeah, like we didn't
really?
Fnatic Rising. So I don't know about him.
How come? I mean, they're one of the better teams.
I don't know. We just never scrimped them. So like, I don't know what to say about
Fair
him.
play.
I was never thinking anything of him.
UK League was kind of stigmatized, rightfully so. I actually gave up on watching UK League halfway through because it was just fucking crap. And then I watched again for playoffs, obviously. So a lot of teams were kind of avoiding UK League teams at a point. That much.
Does that apply to LDLC things?
We played Fnatic quite a few times, yeah.
What do you think of them as a team?
As a team, I think it was kind of, in scrims at least, it was the Magic Felix show. Like, if this guy had a bad game, they would just look terrible. And if he had a good game, like, he couldn't lose, I guess. Like, I don't know. There's so many times where I see this guy getting 5 men, 0 ultis into, like, just insta-1 fights all the time. It was really crazy. So, like, I didn't really watch the games that they played in EU Masters, but if he didn't do something similar to that, he was joking. Like, that's all I can say.
And what about
in the first game, he definitely
Dan?
was.
Sorry, what?
Any thoughts on Dan?
On Dan? I mean, I always thought that Dan was pretty good. Again, we didn't, like, when we scrimmed him, I felt like I was clearly the better player, but again, like, that's just how I'm going to feel against most players.
Listen, you're doing a good job of actually not sounding arrogant, bearing in mind if you just take out, like, usually the disclaimer part, it sounds really arrogant. So you're doing a good job. It's good PR so far, mate. I like it. You're doing what Gilius should do.
Actually,
sure. Yeah. Well, also in the game. Anyway, what about, I think another team we have to talk about. Oh, I've got a question for you, Szygenda. Do you use Twitter much? No? Good, right. So what do you think of the Antonio? You don't use it much, so don't worry about it. You don't have to give a fuck about your replies. Just don't hit the notification. It's going to say 99+, but what do you think about him as a player? Is he actually more than a meme?
I think he does his role on the team. Like, he just plays things. And, like, he's streaming, so... I don't think he's, like, top-tier player, but he's, like... He seems
not
like
bad.
Fine.
Right,
he can, like,
okay.
do fine against everyone. Just, like, chill. I don't think
Thanks,
it's, like, that bad. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
In this year Masters, he would, like, do very fine if they made it further, because everyone played, like, Maokai on, so he'll be, like, probably the best of, like, all the other top laners. Because he just knows how to, like, do his job as a tank.
Sure.
What do you think about Beansu in that regard then? Because firstly, the meta really suited him as well.
Beans, we script moves a lot, and I think he's actually really good. Like, he knows how to play this stuff. Like he's not like on carries, but on the tanks he's like really good. Then he knows or everything as well. Like maybe a little worse than Antonio because he plays like mostly Maokai on, but he's like I think he's good as well on tanks.
What are the general thoughts then on the Vodafone Giants team?
I mean, we obviously played them in group, right? Like, I don't know, it was way too easy to do stuff against them. I think pretty much every time like I played an aggressive early game jungler, I would get like 3 ganks off at least like in the first 10 minutes. I remember the first game we played against them, I killed every single laner in like 5 minutes, like literally all of them. And I don't know, it just felt really easy to play against them. I think they were overrated, but like specifically for Antonio, I think he's kind of the streamer of the team. Like you can't really replace him because he's so like such a big name with the org. But again, he's not like dragging the team down enough that it's even worth replacing in that sense. So he's just more worth for the team as a brand.
Yeah.
But overall as a team, I felt like they were kind of easy to play against. Like there's times where enemy just did really like weird stuff, I guess you could say. I remember the first time I ganked bot lane in like one of the games. Misfortune with full HP just instantly flashed away the second he saw me. Like he was not even trying to outplay like in any way. It was like really strange from my point of view at least.
Okay.
Spanish scene is not really that strong like this year at all.
They've had all the good players robbed, basically, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot more money in other regions now. So France always had more money than Spain did, but like Poland, for example, has a lot more money now because I like Poland's kind of like the Brazil of Europe, if that makes sense, in terms of like how heavy they are into League of Legends. But the teams like the good players are a lot more spread out now than they used to be in the past. And that being said, even in the past, it was kind of the Mad Lions show anyway. When that self-made Mad Lions roster was there, they were that was really what you were talking about when you were talking about Spain. And with that team's collapse, Germany kind of had all of the individual talent this year for sure. But rising talent in Poland was more likely to stay in Poland now, and you have more incentives to be in all of these other regions than you ever did beforehand when it came to Spain. But yeah.
Okay. Right, what about, let's pivot and talk about the GamersOrigin team, because obviously this is a team people expected to do a lot. Like, TynX, you could obviously talk to this a little bit. This was supposed to be a strong team, right?
They free-sailed us, like, obviously they were supposed to be good. But I think their playstyle kind of got, like, exploited a bit, and they kind of didn't follow up on the meta as well as I expected them to. I see them still playing Karthus in the EU Masters games, which theoretically, in my opinion, should be unplayable. Like, it's really niche situation where you can actually play this, but he just kept blind picking it for no reason. Like, I think they're just like their biggest enemy. They made it really difficult for themselves.
Any thoughts, Veteran?
On GamersOrigin, I thought GamersOrigin. So GamersOrigin are really interesting in that they actually came out when they beat LDLC the first time in the playoffs to say that if they didn't have the extra few weeks due to coronavirus to prep, they probably would have just straight lost to them. So they kind of benefited from the thing Batman benefits from in every single fight, which is just immense prep time. But then when it came to the tournament itself, they didn't get immense prep time versus every single team that they were playing against as the team started progressing throughout the rest of it. So people kind of forgot that was a massive factor in how they were able to beat LDLC. They just had a lot more time to adapt and throw off LDLC from what LDLC was seeing them doing in the initial playoffs games. But I also think when it came to their individual lanes, Shemek hasn't necessarily been showing up for the last 2 years now, which is a real shame. He had a bit of a resurgence last year's EU Master in summer. But beyond that, he hasn't really been that impressive. Takui, I mean, I think he's good, but I think he's pretty overrated. He's not up there with like kind of the new blood coming in like VTO and Checolad. And the big strength that GamersOrigin had coming into EU Masters was how Blue Azure looked, particularly in playoffs. But I'm starting to think that maybe a lot of that is just that he got an extended period of time to be able to analyze what TynX was doing at that point, because it wore off after the first week of EU Masters. In the second week of EU Masters, he wasn't giga smurfing on everyone again. So I think they got a lot done in prep time for the first week, and in the second week, the same tendencies weren't there because teams had started adapting, and then Blue Azor was the more disappointing Blue Azor that he was for the rest of the year, which is a bit of a shame, because I was really excited to see Blue Azor play at the EU Masters, because I figured the guy was back. Last year, I thought he was very underrated when he was on Mad Lions. I didn't think he deserved to be booted from them at all. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts now. I think they just benefited from a lot of prep time. And then didn't
they also get the easiest group, basically?
Yeah, but even then you could see that in the second week they looked really, they looked really rough in the second week. They just straight up looked really, really rough. Let me just check everyone who was in their group again, because it was...
They had BTXL second, Gamer Legion, and YDN Gamers. So in theory,
that was actually
one, right?
That was a really close group, actually. YDN, out of all of the teams, was the team that was going to make it out if any of the minor league teams made it out. Italy, really strange to say, but Italy, out of all the minor regions, has consistently been the only region that's played like a major region, or even better League of Legends than a major region a lot of times. And YDM was still one of the only teams in the whole tournament that was playing side lanes out properly, which is very rare. But Italy's team last year, which was Campus Party Sparks, was also doing the same thing. They were actually playing side lane tempo out properly. All the other minor regions are literally just push out top, push out bot, go mid, UG go smash. Like every other minor region team is like that. But YDN, coming from Italy, are definitely like not like that at all. Gamer Legion cheesed a ton of drafts to make themselves look a bit better than they were. I don't necessarily think they should have been here, but they're very close to BTXL and GamersOrigin, to be honest. This is actually a really, really, really close group. I would say that the easiest group probably would have been... LDLC's group was kind of up there, but there were like 3 teams that could have come out from that. The SNG group was theoretically like the least close group, or the Mouse group maybe, because Mouse group had both eSuber and Energy Pot Wizards in that group, and neither of those teams are very good. They had 2 minor regions in their group basically, so it was guaranteed who was going to be going out of that group, so to speak. I actually think that their GamersOrigin group was kind of close.
The Fnatic Mouse group was, in my opinion, also the easiest one. Like, it's pretty easy for both those teams to just make it out. Like, even though they were individually quite strong teams, like they would only have each other to battle, right? Like for the first spot, and the other 2 teams were kind of easy, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Szygenda, on the GamersOrigin team?
Solid team. Like they were just. I don't know. I was expecting them to go to forceful. Like I was thinking these guys, us, Schalke and Mouse would be like the 4 best. So.
I don't know. Solid team too, man. Like I
don't know. It's like all the teams they go out. I was thinking they were solid. Like from scrims, they were really fine as well. I don't know.
That's brilliant for you then, because if we just came and told you before you Masters starts, yeah, you guys are the only one out of those 4 that makes sense.
Yeah,
like, fuck yeah, we'll probably win, right? Nah,
when we
top 40.
I was
Exactly.
like, it will be like for Charles that wins, but then we lost, so that was not.
Right, since you referenced them there, Veteran, Singularity, right?
Yeah.
We have to ask TynX here, since TynX actually is Danish. Right, TynX, explain this to me. Denmark has produced so many good players in League of Legends. Like, if people don't know, in Counter-Strike, now people are going to think, well, Astralis is really good. It's like, mate, Sweden was the gods in Counter-Strike. Like, Denmark used to have like 1 or 2 good teams. It's only in the modern day that they're really good, right? But in League of Legends, bizarrely, it's inverted. There's barely any Swedish players have been godlike players in Denmark. Just at mid lane alone, there's like 6 or 7 people who are really, really good. So why is the Nordic region so underwhelming when it's the specific leagues and then the teams that come from those? Like, why do we just never get a really good team from there?
I think it's just all about money, no? Like, it's pretty simple. All the good Danish players, they don't really have like the national league that maybe the Spanish player have to look up to. Like, for a Nordic player, they would never be like striving to play in Nordic league because there's just no money in it. You couldn't live off it properly, I would say. So they would just always look to go to either Spain, France, or like Poland or German, like one of the other major regions. So like that's why the talent would like instantly start to look to other regions, right?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much the main reason.
I'll also throw in as well, it's a way more expensive country to live in, so you're not going to play for a lower salary. Like if someone offers you a better salary to go to London, of course you're going to go. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Well,
and then
go on.
no, you go first. Sure.
Well, yes, because I can expand on this. Like the so if we're thinking about Poland as kind of like the Brazil of the ERLs, then you can think of the Nordic regions as the Latin America, North Latin America, south of there. And what Dota is to those regions, which is the massive competition that just threw League out. If you're in Latin America, North Latin America, south, you are like all of your friends probably play Dota, and you're that weird kid that plays League of Legends, right? In Sweden, Denmark, you know what that game is. It's CS:GO. CS:GO is so phenomenally big over there that if you are going to invest in an esport, you are going to be investing in Counter-Strike. If you're
There's obviously not as many people as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not investing in Counter-Strike over there because of how much of a phenomenon it is, then you're investing in Counter-Strike's competition. So you're just not going to invest at all, are you? So the money just never like arrived there for the League of Legends scene in those countries. So you end up with a lot of Danish people in, for example, Rogue or LDLC or blah blah blah. You know, like that's where they all end up going in the end, because these are the regions that that really do love League of Legends. It's just not the Nordic regions. They'll have a lot of the best players, just because they also apparently are really giga good. And Denmark specifically has the best internet in the whole of Europe. They have like Korea level internet over there compared to everyone else. But
it's also because of the position, because they have the sick connections and the routing is sick because of where they are, like centrally, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's like numerous factors for why they produce like so many strong esports players, but the attention in those regions is still very much on CS, right? And the investors can't compete with that. And Lighting says about the money, but this is why the money is where it is.
Yes.
You know?
And by the way, for the record, I don't have a hard time imagining Poland as the Brazil of Europe veteran. Just a little Easter egg for anyone who knows my career in CS:GO there.
Fucking good.
Those are the only two countries I don't go to. So yeah, right. With good reason as well, with good reason. And beyond that.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, maybe now the Nordic League is a bit bigger than it used to be, but before we had like a Danish league, maybe season 6, 7, 8, and it's literally just like Diamond 1 players. You know, there's nothing to strive for. You can't really compete in anything and then go further, right? So there's no, like, in Spain, you could kind of be set just playing in a regional league for a long time, and you would get like a fan base, you'd be chilling, like you could play for major teams and still like live okay, you know? But you just couldn't do that in Denmark, so you would like need to go somewhere else. You would just have to if you wanted to live off it. Especially like a bit early on, like now the Nordic thing is coming up a bit, but before it was really like you couldn't.
I will actually say that that's also another thing that I have always known, is that that's the weird thing about Europe, is that because the competition was the best on EU West, everyone, even the Nordic players, play on EU West instead of like the Nordic server, because that's the thing, right, where if anyone doesn't know, this story will explain everything you need to know about Weldon Green, infamous fucking sports psychology trainer / coach guy, which is that he used to always say that he'd been like diamond as like a fucking jungler. I think he was a jungler, right? But what he would leave out was, on a Nordic server, it's like, fuck you. Go fuck yourself. How dare you even say that? That's like me just going and playing like fucking Vietnam or something and going, I was challenger. It's like, in Vietnam. Like, oh, holy shit, what rank were you? Well, you wouldn't probably know. Like, exactly, who gives a fuck? Doesn't matter, does it? What a guy.
I think the apt comparison would be Latin America, North-South, because Vietnam, I have no idea why it has 3 million players. I have no fucking clue how, but that's actually one of the biggest servers on the planet.
It's bizarre.
But
Probably
yeah, I get what you mean.
Free.
But yeah, Latin America, North-South has like, I actually see YouTubers who are just like, I'm Challenger, and then you see that their account was like Latin America North. And it's like, all right, okay, sure you are, buddy, sure you are.
Just because we haven't talked about them at all, the other playoff team we have not addressed is obviously the BTXL team. Now, you've already said that no one gives a fuck about the UK League, and the Fnatic team is way better players, so give us some thoughts on BTXL.
I mean, Deadly's not bad at all. Special, obviously, I think really, really highly of, though I will admit that in his playoff game, especially the last game, he didn't necessarily have one of the best games of his career or anything. But in group stage, he was fucking 1v9 giga smurfing every single game. I don't know if you know how
he's been released from prison for good behavior, so no problem.
Like in group stage of EU Masters, they were 0-3 first week, and then they went 3-0 second week, with Special basically hard carrying every game. A lot of players ended up going on to Deadly as well. But I think a lot of what Deadly did was capitalizing really well well on good setups from everyone else on his team and playing well in fights in that regard. Mechanically, I don't think I've ever seen more drop taxes on Draven in my life, but I still think Deadly's like a really strong team fighter. I'm yet to be fully convinced of him as a laner. And he's still like a strong AD carry in the pantheon of things. I'm just not going to recommend him to be going up in the LEC yet. I still think BTXL's biggest issues are like top lane. Again, like Szygenda's obviously the only good top lane in the whole tournament, but Sendo is like Sendo had a cult for a while, Thorin, though that cult has slowly disbanded over time. And I think when it comes to Taxa, most of what Taxa does well is just play off of the pressure Special provides and the roams that Special likes to do. But yeah, I still really like their comeback story that they did in their group, going 3-0 in the second week. They kind of deserve to get their arse handed to them in the quarters. But we saw really, really good performances from Special until the very last game. And I'm still really excited to see that guy actually make it back into the LEC now that XL have decided to right their past wrongs. You know, it's the best thing they could do, to be honest. There was no reason why he should have been dropped in the first place.
Do you have any thoughts on BTXL, TynX?
I think at least like we were the one who knocked them out in the quarters, I think it was.
Yes.
And they came into this game like not feeling very confident, I think. Because like just from straight up draft, they were banning junglers that they were literally playing or blind picking every game. Like he started banning Graves randomly, even though like I knew it was pretty much the only champion he could actually pull off. And I don't know, it just felt so easy to play against them. They're really scared to play. Like I think their top laner he's been in the scene for like three years for this team, and I think there is a like big reason to actually replace him for someone who has talent, or like put someone in who could probably be better than him. So just in general, I think they weren't as strong as people said they would be. Like that's just how I felt.
Fair enough. You have any thoughts, Szygenda? I mean, again, the UK, so I guess you have never scrimmed them, right? Fair enough. Is there anyone else we should talk about? Is there any other teams? I mean, you've already sort of addressed the others as we went through them, right? Is there any players that we haven't addressed, Veteran? Is there anyone you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think Raxo on kick actually looks really good. I thought Raxo looked like the best player on that day because honestly, everyone in that finals was fucking running it down, including you, TynX, at points. Like that was probably one the lowest quality finals I think I've ever seen in my fucking life. But Raxo actually played really consistently throughout the entire tournament. He's a support player to Andre's shock. But I think he deserves like kind of a special highlight. I already did kind of a tweet on players that you retweeted that I think should be looked into for major regions. But from this specific tournament, Yaki would be on that list for sure, who is the jungler for Isuba. That guy basically plays with like 4 bandos every game, but he still manages to get shit done, which is really, really impressive. I think he's a very intelligent jungler, but this EU Masters definitely in the group stage, he wasn't performing up to the heights that I'm used to seeing in player. In play-ins, he still was performing to ridiculously strong heights. But he saved the best for last for sure. I'd recommend watching like the last game for anyone who still wants to be convinced about him, and I think he deserves a shot higher up. I think Gabo, the top laner for YDN, deserves a shot higher up. He's obviously not like insane yet, but I felt the same way watching him this EU Masters that I felt about watching Cries in last year's EU Masters, for example. Okay. Like this guy's clearly a cut above the rest of his Diamond 3 team, and I want to see him in a good region. And when Cries was allowed to go onto Unicorns of Love, he had some incredibly stand-up performances against everyone, and I want to see Gabo given the chance to do the same thing. In terms of junglers, the jungler for Movistar Riders, I actually I didn't necessarily come into the tournament like a high opinion of, but El Yoya did have some choice good games. And so I think maybe I'd want to see more from him next split, but I think he's on the good team right now to show that, so I don't necessarily need to like recommend him to a higher up team. Alois is still somewhat elo held, but I know a lot of teams are looking at Alois anyway, so I don't necessarily have to give him like an insane shout out. If he wants it, he can take it. And he has expanded his champ pool. Just his team's biggest problems is that they never played around resets properly. And if you have a side laner who is hard shoving out as much as this guy does, and you're not playing resets properly, you may as well not be playing this kind of play style, right? Beyond that,
apparently anyone who's ever worked in the fucking Fnatic org just coaches like half this league.
I mean, if you've ever been in the Fnatic org, that's like an insane thing to put on your reference, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
Like,
listen, there's one person here, I'm just going to flame him anyway, who literally got an entire half a career out of that, which is when Jarge was like, I was part of an 18-0. It's like, yeah, you were part of it, but the question is, could anyone else have handed them a glass of water? No, actually, I'm sure he did something, but he just wasn't Daylor, was he? Let's be real. And he wasn't Yellowstar, so, I mean, he wasn't any of them. He was just the guy who stood going, yeah, well done. I told you to do that, you know.
The supports is always like, so I think Mystiques deserves a shot at LEC. I think Szygenda deserves a shot at LEC. I think TynX deserves a shot at LEC. When it comes to supports, I want to see White in on a better team. He only very recently started playing competitive. This is his first split playing competitive. Okay. It's also Gabbo's first split playing competitive, though. I was actually really uniquely impressed with him, even if it was only on 2 champions. A lot of people say that, but let's be real, a lot of people are only very good on 2 champions at this stage of their competitive career. I thought Nightmares was a really good change for the Fuse kids as well. Rufus had some good games on eSuper and some really, really bad games, but maybe he should chill a bit with the language in solo queue. That would be kind of nice if he wants a better job. Obviously, Yellowstar kind of did well, but he literally gives himself his job, so no one needs to shout him out. Dote from Giants is legitimately good. I actually think Dote could already be playing in LEC. He's a Giants support player. And yeah, I think legitimately this guy could already be playing in LEC. I think if you're looking for a rookie support to bring up, that isn't one of the names that I've often given. It would be a Dote right now. And then maybe Raxo from the EU Masters supports. Pretty is still, I will always have a soft spot for Pretty. He's still kind of good, but I'm not sure if that soft spot would extend to me saying that he should be in LEC anymore. But I just still want to give that guy a shout because I still think he's performing really, really well. But his time was probably a few years ago at that point.
Sure.
I think that's kind of it for shouts from me. Oh yeah, Luke C deserves a shot at in a better region for sure. Luke C definitely deserves a shot in a better region. And you guys shouldn't fire VTO because he actually started to. I think he was the most improved player of the entire tournament. I think VTO is the most improved player of the entire tournament for sure.
I think he's really insane. Like, that's all.
Either him or Java from Movistar Riders, who's the AD carry there. He's probably going to be a guy I rate really highly in terms of AD carry. Neon should never have been fired. Leader should never have been fired. Jessica should never have been fired. Blah, blah, blah. Fire the people who fired those guys, and you'll fix a lot of the league. There you go.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.